Добрый день, уважаемые.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues.
Я рад приветствовать всех.
I'm happy to welcome you all to all our guests who came to hear this session dedicated to university in the times of changes. So the contribution of a university in development of city regional countries. So we can further extend on the scale. I would like to introduce to you our guests, Ruben Nikolopov, director of the Russian Economic School, Vadim Volkov, the rector of the European University in St. Petersburg, Dmitry Afanasyev, Deputy Minister of Science and Higher Education, and Alexander Kuleshov, Director of Skoltech Institute. So this is a very representative panel of experts who will be involved in our discussions. So this question sounds trivial, as a lot has been discussed on what a university means in terms of different development scales and territories. It influences on how it influences economic, social, and cultural trends in today's world. And but of course, that trivial points requires a clarification. It's obvious that a university is a historical community which, for at least 2 recent millenniums, influenced skills and trends we named, among others, together with institutions as monastery or a nobility estate. University is a very efficient tool in history, and at different historical periods it influenced a lot of developments and plots considerably. So we would like to understand what is the role and function of a modern university, and we would like to at least highlight this question, pointing out some question marks and tentative answers. So, of course, the important thing are economic consequences of activities performed by university in the 20th and the 21st century. So this is the most common aspect in discussions. University is not just an enterprise with activities having some economic effects you can evaluate. So I would like to direct this question to Mr. Ruben Nikolopov. It's not that easy. Yeah, right. It's not that easy, and it gets more and more complex as long as our society keeps developing. In today's economy of knowledge, the role of university is huge. But as the society and the economy become even more diverse and complex, the role of university gets transformed. They generate new knowledge through research. And that's their important contribution into the economy. And modern universities are also responsible for the application of this knowledge in our life in economy through development of startups, registering new patents, and so on. And universities play an ever-growing role in the social sector in developing local and global communities. This is an essential role for development of regions, cities, countries, and the world community as such. So when we try to give some quantitative estimates to the contribution of universities, and there are a number of models to assess, although it's quite difficult because we have universities which are more involved in application and building skills students can render to the modern economy. And we have some state-of-the-art universities in Europe and in Russia. We mentioned School, Tech and Shining Academy, so which contribute to generation of human capital through education and generation of new knowledge via research and the use of the new knowledge in economy, and also the social contribution. So in terms of evaluation of those multi-vector university, it's more and more difficult to build a comprehensive model. So because in terms of research, so the standard models of quantitative evaluation which exist today, and one of the models is being developed by the Russian economic school as part of cooperation with Tech. So there are some trivial effects of demand. You have an employer who pays salaries to professors and offer subsidies to students. However, at the level of cities, universities are like the cornerstone enterprises for the economy. But we shouldn't just discuss the demand university generates, but also the offer which comes from the university to the economy. So higher performance due to new human capital, new research, which again increase KPIs in the economy, and generation of new application knowledge, patents, startups, and so on. And we know how to evaluate such things in quantitative terms quite well. But as for social effects and contribution into the development of the community, so is the front edge of science in terms of research on how universities influence the society and the communities. So this is the most exciting area, which has a lot of changes. A question to you as a mathematician and an economist. So this evaluation of systemic social effects, which you call the most difficult, so is it something multidisciplinary, where you need a synthesis of different disciplines, not just mathematics or economics? Well, of course, it's multidisciplinary, because those effects, they include the evaluation of trivial economic effects, but you also need to understand its contribution in terms of social sciences for building up the socium. Without correct evaluation of knowledge generated by university, it's not quite possible. Yes, such evaluation is highly multidisciplinary. So, and the front edge of our science becomes multidisciplinary as far as our society keeps evolving. So, but this approach is, of course, getting more and more complex. Then, thank you very much. Now, a question to Vadim Viktorovich. Vadim. So, unlike Ruben, we represent universities focused on social sciences and humanities. And obviously, the role of a university and its influence keeps growing. And we see it even within the horizon of 5 to 10 years, which is insignificant in terms of history. If we would compare it to the situation we used to have back in the 90s, so the influence and its scale changes. My question is, where is the trend going to? What's the ambition of a modern university in terms of limits a university and its influence can reach? So how would you evaluate a potential answer to those questions? Thank you, Sergey. In my opinion, in recent 50 to 100 years, and especially in recent 10 to 15 years, governments and businesses try to do one thing to the universities. They try to keep them down to the earth, and they manage to do it. Why? Because a university is something unearthly. It's like a quasi-monastery, which should be isolated from the society, where people produce something lofty, something universal. They use scientific methods, so they discover the truth, and they learn how to be isolated from the external influences. And then they come to contact the world and try to share with the world something new. So the model based on Humboldt's university, which focuses on science development, but as long as the academic capitalism and academic socialism were developing, the trend was to keep the universities down to the earth, to try to make it responsible for commercialization of the ideas the university produce. So you need to prove you are helpful and useful. You need to be involved in the life of a city or a university. But those initially were not the ambitions of a university. Those were the ambitions of the external world and the sponsors, or those who pay less money but keep saying that universities need to make money. So this is like a neoliberalism. When you compare a university to a firm who needs to prove its performance, although university is an institution with a mission. And in my opinion, in the Russian context, I keep thinking about the effect of a university on a city, on a region. So at first, you need to produce those effects. Then, only then you can measure them. In order to do this, a university should meet certain conditions. So what conditions would contribute to preserving a university as something universal? And you need to encourage its close links to a reality. On the one hand, a university needs to do what it's required to, and Alexander probably knows it, that a university is required to be involved in developing innovation, in launching new startups. So a university is a source of some circles in the economy of the new type. So to do it, a university should be prone to innovations within itself. So it should have an innovative management system, flexibility, the freedom to make decisions. It should work within the boundaries of a system which would not impose stringent limitations on the university. Otherwise, it would not be able to adapt for a region or a city or an ever-changing market conditions. It should have an infrastructure. So, first of all, we need to ask ourselves a question: what type of university we need now to have an effect on the economy? So a flexible management system, whether it should have a supervisory board, who should be the member of a supervisory or a trustee board, representatives of the university, the business, innovative companies, or a financial sector. So if a university has to be closely linked to the real life, so it needs to imbibe and integrate its life as a flexible management system. Then the faculty, the team, and the rector. So if we want to get more effect from university, so it's up to the rector and the vice rector, but also a university is a team. It's not a corporation where one leader can change the situation. So, but you have collective leadership, like a board, a collegium, and you need to raise new university teams of leaders for it to become a source of serious effects for development. The second point would be, so if we say that a university should be linked to innovative companies, to startups, to the industry, to the government, to healthcare and other institutions, to exchange knowledge, ideas, and create new added value, which would further develop the region. So this is the point we keep losing. So what we as representatives of social sciences and humanities can tell about this? So what would be the language people from different disciplines will communicate on? Academicians or people from the academic community or industry or IT sector or technical sector will use. So this is about building social networks or communication spaces where people would meet together without being scared of each other. And we have a great shortage of such spaces because scientists are locked up in their own shells, like business people, municipal or regional government officials, and we don't have common forms of life. And this is a point we should focus on. And here, a university is a perfect forum for developing interaction system or languages, which would lead to a breakthrough in producing knowledge and having direct and indirect effects, as mentioned by Ruben. I would like to give you an example, which can be the case in the north of Russia, in Siberia, sustainable development and climate, so global warming. These are very important issues on the agenda, but we don't have a language for the climate scientists, political scientists, scientists who study the climate change and the global warming. So we don't have a forum or a language for them to have a discussion and a common agenda. So who can take this role? And universities can contribute in development of Russian regions in the global contents, putting an emphasis on the new issues related to the climate change and the global warming and or epidemiology and concerns related to COVID infection, with the panics, medicine, people's behavior related to getting the infection, and social scientists, medical professionals, they don't interact with each other. In order to achieve this goal, a university should provide an opportunity for such people to get together, so like representatives of the humanities, behaviorists who focus on social behavior, people who study microorganisms, data scientists, and so on. So, in brief, a university is a place where new communities can get crystallized. And the last point, so Russia is a post-imperial space with many languages, many ethnic groups, and you cannot measure the social effects of a university. However, a university is a place which produced a polyethnic elite. I don't know any other place for this.
Спасибо большое, Вадим.
Thank you so much, Vadim.
Этот момент, связанный с... Вообще очень сложно определить
It's extremely difficult to draw a line
культурной системы,
between, or to define the borders of that social economic system that the university
образом
projects being part of that system. How can you assess the scale?
ждать от университетов там.
What can you expect from the university in the near term
Вот у меня
or in
вопрос.
the longer term? That's my question to Dmitry.
Дмитрий, вот все-таки
Dmitry Afanasyev,
в чем
Deputy Minister.
с двух точек зрения, вот
So there are two perspectives. You're an expert.
как человек, который понимает, много чего
You
понимает,
understand a lot about universities. You have vast experience in that. And your team has a lot of experience.
ну, более институционального подхода.
And if we look at it from an institutional perspective,
В этом смысле
what does the ministry expect from the universities in general? There could be big, small universities. It could be regional, federal level.
может быть, в этом
Maybe there is a line
еще как-то
in that.
первое, где
So my first question is,
перспективы влияния университета на широкие
how
концепции
can universities impact our economic life
заключается роль
and
регулятора,
open up new economic prospects? And my second question is, how can you stimulate universities to produce such an impact? Well, I'll try to wear two hats, as you asked me to do. First is an expert, and then as a regulator. So I'd like to follow up on what my colleagues brought up. They said it's extremely difficult to measure the input of universities. There are a lot of methodologies over the past 50 years. Different metrics are on the list, but there is no universally accepted methodology here in Russia or abroad. But again, we try to bring in more and more factors and drivers, but just to add another level of complexity. So what is the time horizon that we measure? Well, we can look at the payroll, we can look at the revenue, we can look at taxes. But how can we measure economic effects over decades? So if we add this new layer, I mean time, it makes things really difficult. So what about impact on the environment? Has the university created a critical mass of human capital that would then bring about systemic effects in the region or in the macro region or in the country in general? So currently we have different models of universities that are in competition. There are global universities. There are national leaders in research. There are universities which focus on just hands-on practical research. There are purely educational establishments that operate at the regional level. So having one-size-fits-all model is really challenging. You need to have a lot of public debate before you can get one. So how can we get this measure of impact. We really need it, actually. People often expect private and government contribution to science and research, but how do we measure it? What is the input? What is the output? What is the longer-term effect? From the managerial point of view, well, we cannot, as a regulator, we can't really say, oh, it's difficult, we won't be able to do it. Sorry. No, a couple of years ago, we introduced one solution here in Russia. We used to monitor the efficiency of the operations of a university. We used a methodology. We gathered all the information about the different aspects of universities' operations, innovations, research, training. We had some KPIs, 7 in the latest edition, and then we got the final score. And based on that, we took certain decisions. Some education establishments were ranked as inefficient. We took sanctions. Some of them were liquidated, stripped of licenses, and so on. But the problem is that this network of educational establishments is so diverse, so wide. And second, since we live in a time of change, you cannot really say that one specific model could be the recipe for success for the next 5 years, not to mention even a longer period. So currently, we're moving away from administrative assessments, simple criteria-based assessments, to reputation-based assessments. And we have a goal. We need to have a professional expert ranking, which would be run not by government, but by an expert community. It needs to cover the entire network. It also needs to take into account different focus, different curricula, different models. So we'll use the 3-mission concept or the Moscow ranking. So the leading association of Russia's universities agreed to fine-tune this methodology. It's a different methodology. It's not about the methodology used by the minister. No, it will be not an administrative one, but it will be driven by the public, driven by the experts. And I really support the idea of platforms. Experts need to come together at the level of universities. These are platforms. You could use econometric research and quality analysis, because you can't always rely on quantitative analysis. So this is an ideal concept, in a way, we understand this, but we'll try to come up with a tool, with a dashboard that will definitely take into account the uncertainty of the future and the diversity of university models, because we don't know which model will be in demand going forward. And at the same time, will be a flexible model. It will be able to change, adapt, because we live in a time to change. One model could be not viable, cannot be inefficient if times change. But if there are many models which are in competition at different levels, it implies that some of them are more efficient, some are more successful. Should things change, should these changes continue? Like one of the examples is the new program that will be launched as part of the national project on universities and research. It used to be called Strategic Academic Leadership. Right now it has a new branded name, Priority 2030, and we got a gift actually on December the 31st. It's a 10-year program, and it was endorsed by the government. So the government gave the go-ahead for it. So one of the provisions is to draft and implement a list of KPIs for universities that would be supported by this Priority 2030 program. So starting from since June, we've been continuing to discuss with the expert community which of the indicators, which KPIs could be applied to those 100 top 120 universities out of 724 that will take part in that program. So it will not be a universal criteria. It will be criteria that will be applied to the top 100, top 120. So we believe we'll have national leaders of research and academia out of those top 100, top 120. So I believe it's great. It's a great example when the expert community assumes certain responsibilities and certain criteria. It doesn't mean that they have to do it on their own. No, we'll have external stakeholders. I mean, it's the business community, it's the government itself that definitely has its own list of priorities, including regional civil society. Because these universities will be embedded in the regional development strategies. So going back to my original argument, we cannot build this model in isolation, just on paper, even if it's from the office of the Ministry of Education, Higher Education and Research. No, this is a consensus-based, comprehensive project that we'd like to finalize. By March the 1st, we should be able to roll it out. It will be definitely some kind of compromise. It will not be ideal, but as I said, assessments are always important, scores are always important. You remember that governors were once ranked by the average score of standardized exams in that particular region. Well, that was a paradox, really. So we definitely need to chart the course, and we hope we'll be able to come up with the top 100 universities that will be leaders here in Russia. There is another issue that we need to bring up and somehow integrate it into our strategy. You have the key consumer of university life and products. That's the graduate, the alumni themselves. So what about the impacts on their happiness, career, success? How do we measure that? How do we incorporate that in that ranking, in that list of KPIs? So I hope that humanities could help us to do that. And there is growing autonomy of universities. Universities figure out what are the KPIs for themselves, and they say to the public, here are our KPIs and we rely on them. Indeed, we are seeing the social dimension of university life, and I have a question to Mr. Kuleshov, to our fourth panelist. So from what we heard previously, Mr. Kuleshov, university is not just something that academia regulates itself, and it's not just important for the academia itself. Universities have an impact a much broader impact on our social, economic life. There are universities which are moving towards this, and we have some of the representatives here at our round table. So what does university today say to the outer world, or what should it do? What should it be saying to the wider world? Well, thank you, Mr. Afanasyev. First of all, the position of the ministry is extremely important. I chaired the commission on the ranking of universities that are subordinate to, that report to the ministry. And what I realized is that we need to have some kind of stratification. So you have it's strange when you have such diverse universities as Ulyanovsk Pedagogical Institute and the Physical and Technical University ranked using the same KPIs. So it's really good that you narrow down the list to 100 or 120, and you need to make a specific ranking for them, a specific list of KPIs. Thank you. So I'd like to go back to the question that you asked. Well, Mr. Yenikolobov mentioned that the new economic school commissioned an impact assessment. Currently, we have our strategic blueprint for the next 5 years. We understand that the KPIs that are not measured using numbers don't really matter, don't really make sense. We need to be able to quantify the impact of universities, for example, Skoltech, on the country's economy. And we asked New Economic School as the most qualified institution, we're really close in spirit to it, we believe this is the most qualified team, to do that job. Well, I could have a longer-term goal, and by that I mean that we could come up with a list of KPIs that could be universal for all Russian educational establishments. We could have a public debate, and if it's widely accepted by the academia, then we could roll it out across the country. And the Ministry of Higher Education and Research definitely plays a key role here. And so by March, we are supposed to get a new blueprint, a new list of KPIs. A couple of details on that. Why we asked New Economic School? At a certain point, we realized that we at Skoltech, we don't have the right competence. As you know, MIT is one of our co-founders. So we first decided to draw on the experience of MIT. It's really hard to say whether it's good or bad. You all know that MIT positions itself as the 11th economy of the world. What does it mean? When you look into it from a different perspective, you could even go as far as to challenge this model. MIT believes that it has produced a lot of startups. Their graduates set up those startups like Biogen, for example, with a capitalization of $25 billion. So they believe that they measure it this way, and they believe they are the 11th economy of the world. Oxford is like a military camp. They say they do this and that and that. They provide jobs. We provide jobs for bakers and for cleaners and so on. So it's really difficult to pick just one model, but we really hope that New Economic School will be able to come up with some model, and it will be really a lifeline to every one of us who work at universities. And finally, going back to your question, KPIs are an important thing, but if you don't quantify them, we won't be able to measure the efficiency. And I am a bureaucrat in a way, and I speak like a bureaucrat, and we need some numbers, some figures. Like you're successful at the level of 9, your success is the level of 6. It's inevitable, and we want to do that. You can actually measure everything by the score. I wanted to be credited for one quote, but unfortunately someone else said. They say that the economy is successful in a way that it provides for self-expression of talents. If the economy doesn't provide for this critical precondition, then the political order and the economy is doomed to fail. But we need to ask ourselves, our education as a key element of the system of talent self-expression, does it fit this criteria, this test? We all understand that it's not, the answer would be negative. And this is a bad signal. These are the categories we need to think in. The number of startups, the number of revenue, the number of venture capital, Web of Science and quotes and references. It's all important. But the foundation is what I just said. Self-expression of talents. People need to realize their potential, their talents. It's impossible, though, without classic university education, without classic university freedoms. Academic freedoms need to be interpreted in a broad sense of this word. You need to be able to speak out. It's all about independence, self-respect. Academic freedoms is a broad concept, but without it, you can't achieve any kind of success. You know, we used to have research centers which worked like prisons in the 1940s and the 1950s in the Soviet Union, but life has proven this is inefficient. Universities need to be autonomous. They need to have some kind of culture. Without that, we won't be able to bring about any breakthroughs. It won't lead to any disruptions. So the best way to regulate it is not to regulate it at all, not to use any administrative leverage. But again, I understand it's a provocative statement. But as for academic freedoms, I absolutely believe that this is a must. Without that, no talents would be able to express themselves.
Thank you, Alexander Petrovich. Thank you so very much for planting this topic. And I realized that your position was very clear, that in the middle of all those stories about the new and old role of the university, so as Alexander said, it's the topic of academic sovereignty and revealing the talents. Well, the success is impossible without it. And so nightingales do not sing inside a cage. Well, clear. A question to all our panelists, to representatives of the university and the government. So every now and then we would have initiatives on university partnerships, different types of cooperation or network programs, different forms of interaction, and our panelists, rectors of the universities, and also, as Dmitry Vladimirovich knows, so they are discussing different formats for bringing each other closer. So what should be in the core of in the center of those partnerships? So, as it was correctly mentioned, universities differ in scale, in their focus, in discipline range, but what's the backbone which links them in this cooperation? So, and I would like to start with this question. So, I'd like to ask this question to Ruben first. So, actually, interaction between universities, especially between smaller universities, which quite often lie beyond the standard formats, like 700 universities, as it was mentioned. So, 4 universities represented here. First of all, The backbone is that our DNA is the same, as Alexander Petrovich said. So academic freedom and the desire to achieve our goal, self-actualization of students who come to study in our universities. So this is one of the goals. Academic partnerships, they serve to this goal for students from different universities and higher education establishments, and the world keeps changing. It's no longer divided into technical people and those of humanities. So we need people with a broad outlook, able to understand people and the society. So our universities are focused on the multidisciplinary focus, which would enable self-actualization of students. And the foundation for our interaction is that we are very close to each other in terms of organization and interaction principles as universities. Vadim, so if Ruben didn't fully cover the topic, what's your opinion on this subject for that academic partnerships? What's the strategic priority for such partnerships in today's academic world? Yeah, brilliant question. If we would go back to our main topic, contribution of a university at the level of a city, region, or country. So, although this effect is hard to measure, we realize that just one university being isolated is not always able to produce this effect, and to avoid this feudalism of a new time when every university is isolated, acting together with the regional government, with a paper mill or a shipyard. So it needs integration, and universities get much stronger when they find complementary areas where they can enrich each other, producing intra-university project together with trans-regional companies. In recent 50 or 100 years, universities were the main driving power for intra-regionalization, and I was following Dmitry Vladimirovich, who was always involved in discussions of the program, which is now called Priority 2030, and it contains administrative and financial incentives for building up partnerships between universities and academic institutions. And other programs which link universities and subjects of certain industries. So this is the correct policy. However, there is a competition between public sector universities because funding is limited, and there is a difficult choice between competition and cooperation. And for me personally, it would be really interesting to see how this dilemma is solved, like competition versus cooperation, competition for resources, and we need to really get to this shift into opinion from the academic community towards cooperation. We need universities of the new type, so which more rely on themselves alone. And it's easier for us to identify the benefits from the cooperation. So when we get closer, the universities of the new type, in order to broaden the scope of choice of selection for our students, for our researchers, and introduce the interdisciplinary aspect benefiting from our strong points. So the classical association. So that's why here we understand that universities, well, will be based on the same logics. They should be universities which would recognize peers in other universities, but which would also enrich capacities of each other. So this should be a union of different, not similar universities. And here we need forums for communication, because we speak different languages, and so do our universities. But maybe the ministry can build up a forum for us, for different universities and representatives of different disciplines to talk and have discussions and build up new projects. Thank you, Vadim. Dmitry Vladimirovich, a question to you, the same question to you, but it would be even more exciting for me to ask it to you as a representative of the respective institutions. What is the point in the university cooperation, and what are the strategic priorities in your opinion? I would start from students, not from the organization. So first of all, we need to enrich the experience of a student, experience he gains through the learning processes. And the more frequent we urge the students to proactively make the choice and select a proactive path in a recent way. So the more we place a student in such a situation, so the better we prepare him for the ever-changing reality of the future. Building up the cooperation chains and the network structures, we promote enriching experience and maintaining motivation, putting the student into this position of a proactive choice. So that's one of the priorities. And as for the organization, it's even more exciting, because working on restructuring of the national project of education and science, and starting the model on universities. So there was one project approved on integration. It has clearly stipulated trends for integration between education and science, cooperation with the real-life sector, also cooperation processes in education, development of R&D centers, regional and world level, and so on. So we are upscaling this goal at the level of a federal national project. And the further goal is cultural, to transform this feudal mindset, as Vladimir Viktorovich said, and regulate the regulatory context. We need to remove the barriers. The two goals are equally challenging on the cultural and regulatory side, and also incentives. So we need to remove the barriers which prevent us from free interaction in building up educational programs and projects. So this is the program our ministry will focus on. So at least this is our position for today. And Alexander Petrovich, so I would like you to wrap up your personal opinion. Well, you shared your opinion with us, but maybe you add something to your vision on what's the strategic priority in the interaction between universities in today's world. Well, I want to add something. You know, in the Soviet Union and in Russia, maybe it's a national trait, or maybe this is the legacy of the communism. So all cooperation models would eventually end up in nothing. Everyone wants to work in his own garden. Well, and I know this for sure. And we need to get away from this. Cooperation is really needed. I was not authorized, so we have 4 rectors attended the panel, and we are practically discussing creating an association. Well, an association of a certain type. Let's see what's the outcome, but the point why we are limited by this micro club. Well, it's clear, because we want to support academic freedoms and build up a new university culture. So we are following the same trend. Our disciplines and topics are different, but there is an intersection. Ruben talked a lot about the multidisciplinary aspect, and it's correct. So we are quite complementary in shunning academy in the Russian economic school and Schooltech, but with the European University, but without supporting academic freedoms at new levels, we're not getting anywhere. So not only the euro at a legal level, but in real life. Thank you, Alexander Petrovich. I think this is a really good reason to summarize and wrap up this panel, this discussion. We are different, and maybe so if you have 2 identical persons, then it's not clear why you need them both. You can do with just one. And the diversity of people present in the studio actually they define the prospects for our interaction in a network context or otherwise. So the modern university, new models, evaluation and assessments methodology, the importance of a university for a wide range of phenomena, cultural and social, and the rest, well, was slightly covered in our today's discussion, and I hope that we can continue our dialogue also at the level of association mentioned by Alexander Petrovich. I would like to thank all our panelists. Thank you, dear colleagues. And the main point is that let's assume this is just the beginning. Thanks for your participation.